For Monday, March 4th, 2019, will please come to order, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Sharon.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes from the February 21st, 2019 meeting. Those minutes are in your packet. Do we have a motion relative to those minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Baker and seconded by Mr. Schran for the approval of the minutes for the February 21st meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. And the minutes for February 21st, 2019 are approved. There's no legislative matters referred to committee. We have one discussion item, and that is item AX, which was held back from the last fiscal agenda.
Good afternoon. Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget Management. So the item that we're discussing today is a fiscal item that OBM had submitted on its regular fiscal agenda for the month of February. It was an increase in the amount of $200,000 for the law department to support a contract for temporary attorneys. I do want to note, if you recall at the meeting, we had submitted a substitute, well, in advance of the meeting, to reduce the amount to $54,000, which is the amount that was approved by the Board of Control last Monday, amount of the contract that was approved by the Board of Control. So what we're asking now is just to increase appropriations so that the law department's budget remains relatively whole, because this was an unanticipated contract. The budget for the law department does have appropriation to cover the contract should you decide to not approve this item, but it would impact their ability to pretty much do anything else. We have the contract for their case management system that's working its way through the procurement process. And then there's another contract that was just approved for software. And then that would be basically it for them. So OBM is still requesting that council approve the fiscal item.
And Director, would you be comfortable with the $54,000 number that came out of the Board of Control?
We're absolutely comfortable with that. Just a little background. When we requested the $200,000, we didn't have even an estimate of what the
Understood.
contract, we did it in advance. And then we didn't want to change it at the last minute once we did find out. But so I have absolutely no problem reducing it.
Okay, and I would note that the council president has joined us for the meeting. And I would like to make it clear the procedure for today, which is that we don't actually have any legislation in front of us. It's just a discussion item of the item that was held back. And if we get through this meeting and we get all the questions answered and we seem to be in a positive place, well, then that would be a signal that you could include this item on the next fiscal agenda and expect that it would be approved. So that's kind of what the process is.
And just a heads up, that would be the end of March. So there's no reason to do a special fiscal agenda for this item. We do them only once per month in the beginning of the year. So that would be at the end of March.
Right. Any further presentation?
Excuse me, Jonathan McGorry with the Department of Law. I do have a brief presentation. I know a number of you have heard this at Board of Control, but not all the council folks here today have. So as a quick overview, when the county received the latest subpoena, and the request was all the emails, initially just all emails from the county executive and 5 other county officials. Since that time, that scope has been limited to email since 2016 for the county executive and the other individuals. And then there's been some additional search terms that we've been given for the other individuals, not the county executive, to help limit the scope of the search. We get stuff out about medical history and questions to FMLA and other HIPAA privileged information. So with this review, in order to scan the documents, the emails, and make sure that there's no information that would be privileged by the attorney-client privileged, HIPAA, or any other thing that would not be, that's not required to be handed over in the subpoena. We needed to bring on some additional attorneys to help assist with the review. And with that, we went through the Board of Control process, got a few bids, and selected a vendor who could provide us currently with 11 temporary attorneys to help complete this review by the deadline. Now, typically, we don't do this for public records because if we got a public records request for this information, it's so expansive, so broad, we'd legally be able to limit it to a few things that we'd be able to do in-house. But given the number of emails we've been asked to produce, we wanted outside assistance so that we could produce this in a timely fashion and not continually have to ask for extensions.
Okay. Director, anything further?
Jonathan has expressed the process that we undertook, and we wanted to achieve a competitive process, select vendors through that method, and make sure that we comply with county code, policies, procedures. This was not an anticipated task of the law department, and it is something that we must comply with in a timely fashion, hopefully without any additional extensions, and we just need to get it done. The county is taking the steps, or the law department is taking the steps to protect attorney-client privilege of the county, and that's something very important that I wish to stress. Not of individuals, not of individual offices, but of the county in general. And not every communication certainly will even meet that definition, but we have to undertake the analysis, apply the law, and determine if there are such privileged communications, keep them in a separate log. Those will be produced to the Mahoning County, I'm sorry, not to the Mahoning County prosecutor, but to Judge Handwerk, who will oversee the grand jury process, and he will answer any questions or dispute over whether or not something is attorney-client privilege. And that is all that we ask to undertake.
Do you have an anticipation as to when work by the temporary attorneys will begin?
We anticipate that they'll start on Wednesday of this week. We've gotten the computer set up, credentials for them, and we'll be ready to go on by Wednesday.
Okay. Okay. Questions? We have Councilman Tuma followed by Schran.
Thank you. Through the chair. So if there are more subpoenas issued, is this going to require additional attorneys and additional costs?
So when we initially went to Board of Control, we asked for $140,000 not to exceed amount, with the understanding that if we get additional subpoenas, we could have additional funding. But at Board of Control, we decided we have one subpoena in front of us right now that we're dealing with. Let's only budget for that. If we get additional subpoenas, we can always go back and request more money. And that would include, another public review so that make sure that this stays in the public eye and they know what we're doing and we're not trying to get around anything.
And then as a follow-up question, is there a point person in the law department who's going to be working with these 11 attorneys, these temps?
There are two other attorneys, including myself, that have been sort of handling all the issues related to this. Myself, Jared Zabolowski, and no, I butchered your name there. Sorry, Jared. And Sarah Nemastil, the law department.
Okay. So any temps that you hire are going to, before they determine attorney-client privilege, go through one of you two? Because they're not, they don't work for the county. I don't know how they're going to know what attorney-client privilege, other than generalities.
Correct. So not only are these contract attorneys, I've reviewed all of their resumes and they've done this type of work before.
Okay.
But Sarah in our law department has come up with a list of the attorneys that have been in here since 2016, outside law firms we worked with, and then also outlined the law on attorney-client privilege. There's like 8 steps you got to look through.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Schran.
And I think you said it was only 2016? Is that the length of this? And how long in 2016? The entire year?
January of 2016.
Just 1 month?
No.
Oh.
Commencing with January of 2016,
All the way through to December?
correct.
Okay, so to follow up my colleague's question, if that generates, more than likely, it's going to generate a question that maybe falls over into another subsequent year, then we're going to be back at having this conversation for 2017 potentially, or?
I'm sorry, January 2016 to the present.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, thank you, all right. I was missing that as far as from that. So we are talking 2.5 years then potentially, or by the time you get through, or two plus years. And can you just, for purposes of this conversation, tell me who is a client, just so I have clarity in my own mind as to who the client is that we're looking to protect versus the individual who might be sitting in a chair?
So it's very similar in the corporate world. The entity is the client. So in this instance, it'd be Cuyahoga County as a whole would be the client that we need to protect in this instance.
So any action by an individual that might be inappropriate is not protected? Is that, I mean,
think
well,
so.
an action that maybe is being investigated that would be inappropriate is not a protected activity?
So there's an exception to the attorney-client privilege called the crime fraud exception. If somebody goes to attorney in the county and says, "Hey, I want to defraud the citizens of the county, and this is my plan. What do you think, Jonathan?" And if I gave him advice or her advice, that information would not be privileged. The way it works out is in a trial setting, that information would go to the judge, and the judge would decide whether or not, hey, this is in furtherance of a crime. You got to release this information. It's not for the attorneys for the county to decide whether or not that privilege applies, since in that situation, it might be the attorney giving the bad advice.
If I could give a good example, I
Please.
think council was recently enlightened upon the county's opioid litigation and the actions that are being taken on behalf of Cuyahoga County. I believe it was Mr.
That's okay, we can leave the name out.
Thank you.
It was
yes.
done in executive
And
session.
Communications from that entity would have been sent to the county executive as to other members of the county departments that would have been called upon to testify in those proceedings. We anticipate those, anything to do with the opioid litigation, we are mandated to protect and provide in a privilege log. That would be a good example of a county's attorney-client privilege.
Sure, and that was all handled in executive session in a confidential nature, and that would very easily to be identified. There have not been similar communications, though, if any of the stuff that we're reading about that was subpoenaed, or records, or phone records, or computer records, we have not had similar discussions.
No.
So, following your logic on that, those would not necessarily be protected as attorney-client if there was something improper in any of those.
At first glance, I would agree with you.
Thank you.
Councilman Gallagher.
Okay, and I appreciate our phone call yesterday, working past the hours. I greatly appreciate that. But as for 11 attorneys for that scope of the work, do we have an idea, other than in gigabytes, how many actual emails we're talking about?
Yeah, so I received an update this morning. They've run the search with the search terms, and they've come up with about 161,000 emails to review. Now, in those 161,000, there might be duplicate emails. You send an email to Jack, so it's in Jack's inbox and it's in your sent box. So the software that we will be using will be able to figure those out. Deduplicate is the term they use, and then so ideally that'll be a much smaller number.
Okay, and the interim director, how many openings do you have in your department?
Currently, we have 3 openings.
3, okay. And you're going to be posting those?
We are.
Okay.
We are taking steps currently as we speak.
That would be helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Baker.
Yes, this has been a long road in the Board of Control, So I appreciate your work on this. I know you've been back and forth and trying to narrow the scope so that we can feel good about supporting your actions. I think the important thing to understand is that this morning in Board of Control, we did allow a $20,000 software purchase. So this 74, or this 54 is in addition to that, and it's in addition to the 20. So we're actually, for 2 or 3 months, I think we said, this software will be with us. After that, it's no longer ours. Secondly, we have a deadline of March 18th. And if you're going to get started on Wednesday, that leaves us about 11 days. 8 days, that's right, not weekend, right? So that too is a little concerning, that we don't anticipate asking for an additional deadline, but we know that we have one coming up pretty fast. All of that is part of what we've been working through for the last couple of weeks in trying to help you with the funding and organizing of this project.
So, Director, is it a fair statement that the attorneys get started on Wednesday morning and they work Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and by the time they've worked 3 whole days, you're going to be able to make an assessment of, well, how many are we able to cover, and how much progress are we making, and then you'll be able to have a better idea as to what it would take to achieve the March 18th deadline. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair, but I would expect at least the first day to be slower in progression as we get
Sure.
get the
Okay.
ground rules in place and get organized. And I don't know how much production we'll have on that first day, so,
Well, that's
will-
why I said 3 days at
Yes.
least to
yes.
And to continue that, we've had some discussions internally already thinking, all right, after those 3 days, we did the same thing. All right, we're going to do an assessment on this Friday, and if we need to reach out to the temp agency firm and see if we can get additional attorneys if needed, we explored possibly having them work over the weekends at home if we felt comfortable with the folks that came in, that they didn't need direct supervision. So we're already trying to, throw some ideas out there if we do need to ramp up after a couple days.
Okay, and noting that Ms. Simon has joined us, any further questions? Yes, Ms. Baker.
Just to get and I think I asked this morning too, what is your confidence level in meeting the deadline, March 18th? Are you 50-50? Are you 80? Where are you? And now that you have at least this much information, you have the software, you'll probably get the ability to hire the 11. You understand the scope of work. It's been reduced down to some of the search terms. And you know the amount of emails. I mean, there's a lot of information now that you do know.
Councilwoman Baker, if I may, I've never done this before. We've never done this before. I would love to give you a better estimated answer. My goal is to shoot for completion on the 18th. I sincerely and truly, honestly want to complete that deadline. If it seems completely unreachable, I will reach out to the Assistant Attorney General's office in advance of the 18th, but not now. I sincerely want to get started and see what we can accomplish.
I wasn't really asking you to extend the deadline. I was asking if you felt comfortable in meeting the deadline with the information that you now have in front of you. Don't know.
We're going to work our hardest to complete that deadline.
Director, what stops you from getting the attorney started tomorrow morning? I mean, one additional day would certainly help.
So we have the data now. We've been told that it takes a period of time to upload this massive amount of data to the software. Now that we have Board of Control approval for the software, we negotiated out the final terms this morning with the vendor. So if we sign a contract with them and get them started, I was just told by the temp agency they didn't want to start like in the afternoon, because that was our initial thought. If we can get this stuff uploaded, we probably won't have it uploaded until tomorrow afternoon. They said they really just want to work full days, but I could reach out to them again and see if they'd be willing to reconsider that and bring them in tomorrow.
Okay, understood. Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that we've batted it around, we've gotten our questions answered, and so I think you can take it as a positive signal that that you can put that item on the next agenda and expect that we would likely approve it. Okay, any miscellaneous business? Hearing none and with no further business to command our attention, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.